So the biggest announcement over the last couple of days was from Pete Buttigieg, who ended his campaign on Sunday night. The campaign had reportedly run out of money ahead of Super Tuesday, where they were having a tough time finding states to win. And Pete basically said that he wanted to step aside so that the center-left candidate could take on Bernie Sanders. He did not explicitly endorse Joe Biden at the time, but right before we recorded, there's news breaking that he will. Here's part of his speech on Sunday night.
We are reminded just how urgent it is that we change who is in the White House. We cannot afford to miss this moment. With every passing day, I am more and more convinced that the only way we will defeat Trump and Trumpism is with a new politics that gathers people together. We need leadership to heal a divided nation, not drive us further apart. We need a broad-based agenda that can truly deliver for the American people, not one that gets lost in ideology. We need an approach strong enough not only to win the White House, but to hold the House, win the Senate, and send Mitch McConnell into retirement. And that broad and inclusive politics, that is the politics that we have attempted to model through this campaign. That, I believe, is the way forward for our eventual nominee.
What did you guys think of Pete's decision?
I think it makes sense, where he was. We had talked about this. He needed to demonstrate that he could appeal to the base of the Democratic Party in South Carolina, and he just wasn't able to deliver on that, and that made it really hard to argue for why he should stay in the race. I think you see in that speech, honestly, I think you saw it in Chasten's speech and then Mayor Pete's speech. I think you saw
Chasten gave a very beautiful, moving speech, I thought.
After falling in love with Pete, Pete got me to believe in myself again. And I told Pete to run because I knew there were other kids sitting out there in this country who needed to believe in themselves too. This campaign was built on an idea of hope, an idea of inclusion, an idea of addition rather than subtraction, about bringing people together, about looking your neighbor in the eye and saying, maybe we don't agree on everything, but let's agree on this. We've got one shot. And that's what we did. We went out there with that one shot, and we gave it everything we had because it is time for every single person in this country to look to the White House and know that that institution stands for them, that they belong in this country.
Absolutely. It was a beautiful and moving speech, and I think even in what Pete's saying, I think you see his strengths and his weaknesses and sort of, why a gay mayor from South Bend, Indiana, was able to outlast so many more seasoned politicians. I think he's an incredibly smart person. I think he's an incredibly strategic and thoughtful person about why he was in this race and what he brought to this race. At the same time, I think what you heard in there is, a lot of rhetoric and a lot of kind of talking points that made it hard to really get to know what was really driving his campaign, especially once he started sort of shifting and trying to take on Bernie as the race went on. But that said, I was so moved by Chasten. It's a classic case of seeing someone you like a lot give a speech about how much they love and believe in the person they're with. That tells you that maybe you're not always seeing. Maybe Pete is a little bit stiff, and maybe he's not always the most open about who he is. But in Chasten's speech, I think you saw why Pete was such a strong candidate and why it did matter that we had a gay candidate make it this far in this race.
Yeah, I mean, it's historic, and he won Iowa, and no one can ever take that away from him, except the Iowa Democratic Party tried, which is truly unfair, in the tail of the tape here. But that aside, I believe what Pete said about wanting to sort of clear the moderate lane to go against Sanders. I also think this is a decision that was born out of necessity. I imagine fundraising is very hard when you pull out the spreadsheet and look at the map and try to decide where you'll get delegates. There weren't a lot of options. I agree with you guys. The Chasten speech really choked me up. Pete also, when he talked about his father and when he talked about a young kid who might not think that there was a place in politics for him if he or she were gay. That is an incredibly powerful, moving thing. Pete raised $100 million. He was the mayor of South Bend. He raised $100 million. Younger than us, or me at least, which is remarkable. And, I think he clearly is an incredibly talented person. He's very smart. He got better and better and better in debates and interviews as he went along. It was impressive to watch. I did feel the same way as you did, love it at the end. Like, I would love to see Pete just like grab the mic out of the thing and say fuck it and just let rip on what he really thinks. But maybe that's not who he is.
And
was
like
demanding
who the real
a
him
bulwark
is. I
thing.
think that is. I think who we saw is the real Pete. I think that's who he is. And look, Pete got a ton of shit online, and we have criticized him at times too. But I think it's worth stopping and just. It is amazing that a 37, now 38-year-old mayor from South Bend, Indiana, in a field that was this crowded, that we were just talking about how hard it is to get attention with this many big names, rocketed to the top of the Democratic field, won the Iowa caucuses, the first openly gay candidate to win a primary. That is a huge accomplishment. And by the way, we talk all the time on the show about candidates who are inspiring people. Pete inspired a lot of people. A lot of people were passionately inspired by his candidacy, and that is not nothing. I also think, by the way, that Pete's message is a message that probably fits not only the Democratic electorate, but the general electorate maybe better than anyone else's. Mm-hmm. And if I were Joe Biden and Joe Biden's team, I would look at all Pete's speeches and Pete's message, and I would think about how to make sure that was my message. In fairness to the Biden people, that's a lot of Biden's message anyway, but sometimes Pete's is even sharper.
And for any Pete fans out there, take solace in knowing that he could run for president every 4 years until 2060, and that would be the year he would be Bernie Sanders' age.
That is an incredible stat. Just incredible. And the fact that the fact that Donald Trump is now the youngest male in the race is a horrifying stat, but also relevant. To your point, like it does seem like I think Pete is has announced he's going to endorse Joe Biden. It's more likely though that his support gets sort of partially distributed to a bunch of people because voters are complicated. 538 seems to think that Pete dropping out will hurt Bernie because some of his votes will go to Warren and Bloomberg and others who are just at the threshold of 15% viability and seeking delegates. Yeah. I would just say to all of the campaigns out there, or all supporters of all campaigns, if you want Pete's supporters, maybe now is not the time to publish your mocking high hope stance on Instagram or Twitter or whatever. Treat people like human beings. Politics is pretty basic. If someone's a dick to you, they're probably not going to come to your side later on when you need them.